Elena Vasquez adjusted her grip on the weathered wooden stock of her grandfather's hunting rifle, feeling the familiar grooves worn smooth by generations of human hands. The weapon looked absurdly primitive among the gleaming plasma rifles and photon cannons that filled the armory of the Galactic Defense Station Omega-7. Her fellow Marines from a dozen different species had stopped trying to hide their amusement at the ancient Earth weapon she insisted on carrying into combat. Still playing with your museum piece, human? Zektar clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter among his insectoid species. The towering Vorthan warrior gestured with one of his forearms toward his own weapon, a sleek energy rifle that could allegedly vaporize a small building. That thing belongs in a historical display, not a battlefield. Elena checked her rifle's bolt action for the 100th time that morning, her movements precise and practiced. The Model 70 Winchester had been manufactured on Earth over 3 centuries ago, before humanity had even discovered faster-than-light travel. While her squad mates carried weapons that fired coherent light beams and molecular disruptors, Elena's rifle still used chemical propellants to launch metal projectiles. The other Marines found this concept both hilarious and primitive. My grandfather killed a grizzly bear with this rifle when he was 16, Elena said quietly, running her thumb along the brass casing of one of her hand-loaded cartridges. His grandfather used it to hunt elk in the Colorado mountains. My great-great-grandmother carried it through the resource wars. This rifle has never failed my family. The weapons briefing room fell silent except for the low hum of the station's life support systems. Commander Thexanel, a reptilian saurian with scales that shifted color when he was irritated, stepped forward to address the assembled squad. His scales had turned a deep orange, indicating his displeasure with the pre-mission chatter. Listen carefully, Marines. Thexanel's voice carried the authority of someone who had survived 40 years of galactic warfare. Intelligence reports indicate that the Chromach Empire has established a forward operating base on the moon of Kepler, 442b. This base threatens shipping lanes throughout this sector and must be eliminated. Elena studied the holographic display that materialized above the commander's desk. The enemy base sprawled across a crater-scarred landscape, its defensive positions clearly visible in the pale light of the system's twin stars. Automated defense turrets dotted the perimeter, while heavily armored Chromach soldiers patrolled between reinforced bunkers. The Chromach are not to be underestimated, Thexanel continued, his scales darkening to a somber purple. They stand 3 meters tall, possess natural armor plating, and carry weapons that can penetrate most standard military shields. Their society values strength above all else, and they view other species as inherently inferior. Zektar's mandibles clicked nervously. Commander, what's our tactical advantage? How do we overcome their superior size and armor? Speed and precision, the commander replied. We drop fast, hit hard, and extract before their main force can respond. Each of you will be assigned specific targets based on your species' natural abilities and weapon capabilities. Elena raised her hand, ignoring the amused glances from her squawmates. Sir, what's my assignment? Thexanel's scales shifted to an uncomfortable yellow-green. Vasquez, you'll provide covering fire from the ridgeline overlooking the base. Your traditional weapon should be adequate for suppressing enemy movement while the assault teams advance. The other Marines exchanged knowing looks. Covering fire duty was typically reserved for soldiers whose weapons were considered too weak for direct assault. Elena had been relegated to the sidelines once again, expected to watch while others did the real fighting. After the briefing, Elena made her way to the station's observation deck, where massive viewports revealed the star-filled void of space. The transport ship that would carry them to Kepler, 442b, hung in the docking bay like a sleeping giant, its hull scarred by countless missions. She pulled out a small leather pouch containing her ammunition and began the ritual of checking each cartridge. The bullets looked crude compared to the energy cells and plasma charges her squad mates used. Each cartridge was roughly the size of her little finger, topped with a pointed copper-jacketed lead bullet. The brass cases had been reloaded so many times that Elena could trace the history of her family through the tiny scratches and dents in the metal. Planning to throw those at the enemy? Lieutenant Crixal had approached silently, a skill that came naturally to his feline Nexari species. His whiskers twitched with barely suppressed mirth as he examined Elena's ammunition. These cartridges are loaded with 180-grain bullets, traveling at 2,700 feet per second, Elena replied evenly. Each one carries enough kinetic energy to drop a charging moose. My grandfather taught me that shot placement matters more than raw firepower. Crixal's ears flattened against his head, a sign of confusion among the Nexari. Moose? What is this creature you speak of? Elena smiled for the first time that day. A moose is an earth animal that stands 2 meters tall at the shoulder and weighs as much as a small vehicle. They have thick hide, dense bones, and a bad attitude. If this rifle can stop a charging moose, it can handle whatever we face out there. The lieutenant's whiskers twitched again, but this time with interest rather than amusement. You speak of your weapon as if it were alive. In a way, it is, Elena said, shouldering the rifle and checking the scope's clarity. This rifle has been part of my family for generations. It's been carried through forests and deserts, mountains and plains. Every hunt, every battle, every moment of danger has left its mark. The rifle knows its purpose. 6 hours later, Elena found herself strapped into the cramped troop compartment of the assault transport, listening to the steady thrum of the ship's engines as they approached their target. Around her, the other Marines conducted final equipment checks on their advanced weaponry. Indicator lights blinked in patterns of blue and green, confirming that energy cells were charged and targeting systems were operational. Elena's pre-combat ritual was simpler. She loaded 5 cartridges into the rifle's internal magazine, chambered a round, and engaged the safety. The mechanical sounds of her weapon stood out sharply against the electronic chirps and beeps filling the compartment. 2 minutes to drop zone. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. Weather conditions are clear, no atmospheric interference detected. Through the small porthole beside her seat, Elena could see the surface of Kepler 442b growing larger. The moon's gray landscape was broken by impact craters and rocky outcroppings that would provide excellent concealment for a sniper. She had studied the terrain maps until she could navigate them with her eyes closed, identifying potential firing positions and escape routes. Remember your assignments. Sergeant Vork's gravelly voice filled the compartment. The massive Cronin warrior served as their squad leader, his stone-like hide making him nearly impervious to small arms fire. We drop fast and move to our positions immediately. No heroics, no deviations from the plan. The transport shuddered as it entered the moon's thin atmosphere. Elena felt her stomach drop as the ship began its rapid descent toward the landing zone, located 5 kilometers from the enemy base. The plan called for the assault teams to approach from multiple directions, while Elena provided overwatch from a ridge that overlooked the entire facility. 30 seconds to touchdown, the pilot announced. Prepare for immediate deployment. Elena stood and joined the line of Marines moving toward the drop ramp. Her rifle felt comfortable in her hands, its weight familiar and reassuring. While the others checked their high-tech equipment one final time, Elena simply flicked off the safety and settled the weapon's sling across her shoulder. The transport touched down with a metallic thud, and the rear ramp dropped to reveal the alien landscape beyond. Elena was among the first to exit, her boots crunching on the rocky soil as she began the trek toward her assigned position. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth standard, making her movements feel almost bouncy despite the weight of her equipment. Behind her, the other Marines spread out in tactical formation, their advanced weapons sweeping left and right as they searched for threats. Elena moved with the confident stride of someone who had grown up hunting in rough terrain, reading the landscape for signs of danger or opportunity. The ridge overlooking the Cromoc base was exactly as the reconnaissance photos had shown it. A natural rock formation provided excellent concealment, while offering clear lines of sight to the enemy positions below. Elena settled into position behind a boulder, using her pack to create a stable shooting rest for her rifle. Through her scope, she could see Cromoc's soldiers moving between the defensive positions. They were indeed massive creatures, standing head and shoulders above any human. Their natural armor plating gleamed dully in the light of the twin stars, and their weapons looked capable of destroying vehicles. Elena adjusted her scope for the range and began studying wind conditions by watching the movement of dust and debris in the base below. Unlike her squad mates' energy weapons, her rifle fired physical projectiles that were affected by gravity, wind, and atmospheric conditions. Every shot required careful calculation and precise execution. Her radio crackled to life. Overwatch, this is Assault Team Alpha. We're moving into position for the attack. Be ready to provide covering fire on my signal. Elena keyed her microphone. Copy, Alpha. I have eyes on the target area. Multiple enemy contacts visible. As she watched through her scope, Elena counted at least 30 Chromok soldiers visible within the base perimeter. Their patrol patterns were disciplined and professional, suggesting that these were veteran troops rather than inexperienced garrison forces. This mission was going to be more challenging than anyone had anticipated. The assault teams moved into position with professional efficiency, their advanced equipment allowing them to communicate silently and coordinate their movements with precision. Elena watched as they approached the perimeter defenses, knowing that the success of the entire mission might depend on the next few minutes of combat. All teams, this is Alpha Leader. Sergeant Vorkseke's voice came through the radio. Execute assault in 3, 2, 1 mark. The first phase of the assault unfolded exactly as planned. Elena watched through her scope as bright flashes of energy fire erupted from multiple positions around the Chromok base. The plasma rifles and photon cannons of her squad mates lit up the alien landscape with devastating bursts of coherent light, their beams carving through defensive barriers and forcing the enemy soldiers to scramble for cover. Initially, the Chromok seemed caught off guard by the sudden assault. Elena could see them rushing between positions, their massive forms moving with surprising speed despite their size. Their return fire came in the form of crimson energy bolts that crackled through the thin atmosphere, leaving glowing trails in their wake. Overwatch, this is Bravo Team. Lieutenant Cricksal's voice came through the radio, accompanied by the distinctive whine of energy weapons firing. We're taking heavy fire from the eastern bunker complex. Request immediate suppression of enemy positions. Elena swept her scope across the eastern section of the base, quickly identifying the source of the enemy fire. 3 Chromok soldiers had taken position behind reinforced barriers, their weapons sending continuous streams of energy toward the advancing assault teams. The sophisticated targeting computers and their equipment allowed them to maintain devastating accuracy even while under fire. Elena centered her crosshairs on the closest Chromok soldier, a massive warrior whose armor plating showed the scars of previous battles. She estimated the range at 400 meters, with a slight crosswind from left to right. Unlike the energy weapons her squad mates carried, Elena's rifle required her to account for bullet drop and wind drift, calculations that had become second nature through years of hunting and practice. She squeezed the trigger with steady pressure, feeling the familiar recoil of her grandfather's rifle. The brass cartridge ejected with a metallic clink, landing among the rocks beside her position. Through her scope, Elena watched as the Chromok soldier suddenly staggered backward, a look of confusion crossing his alien features before he collapsed. The other 2 enemy soldiers immediately began searching for the source of the shot, their heads swiveling as they tried to identify Elena's position. Unlike energy weapons, which produced visible beams that could be traced back to their origin, Elena's rifle created only a small muzzle flash that was easily concealed among the rocks. Elena worked the bolt action of her rifle, chambering a fresh cartridge with practiced efficiency. The second Chromok had moved to a different position, but Elena adjusted her aim and fired again. The bullet struck the alien warrior's center mass, sending him sprawling across the defensive barrier he had been using for cover. Unknown sniper, unknown sniper. The excited voice of Zektar filled the radio frequency. Someone is dropping Chromok soldiers from long range. Where's that fire coming from? Elena didn't bother to respond. She was already tracking the 3rd enemy soldier, who had abandoned his position and was attempting to retreat to the safety of a nearby bunker. Elena led her target slightly, accounting for his movement, and squeezed the trigger. The Chromok warrior fell mid-stride, his weapon clattering across the rocky ground. 3 shots, 3 kills. Elena's grandfather would have been proud. The elimination of the eastern defensive position allowed Bravo Team to advance rapidly toward the main base complex. Elena could hear the excitement in Lieutenant Cricksal's voice as he reported their progress. Overwatch, whoever just cleared that position deserves a commendation. We're moving to the primary objectives now. Through her scope, Elena could see that the Chromok forces were beginning to adapt to the assault. Enemy soldiers were abandoning their fixed positions and moving to establish overlapping fields of fire that would make any further advance extremely costly. Their discipline and tactical flexibility suggested that these were elite troops, not the garrison forces that intelligence had predicted. Alpha Team to all units. Sergeant Vorksake's voice carried a note of concern. Enemy resistance is heavier than expected. They're coordinating their defense and establishing kill zones at every approach route. Elena swept her scope across the battlefield, analyzing the developing situation. The assault teams had successfully breached the outer perimeter, but they were now facing concentrated resistance from the remaining Chromok forces. The alien warriors had positioned themselves in mutually supporting positions that made them difficult to engage without exposing the assault teams to devastating crossfire. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Elena could see muzzle flashes from at least a dozen enemy positions, each one capable of bringing overwhelming firepower to bear on any advancing friendly forces. The advanced weapons carried by her squad mates were powerful, but they weren't designed for this kind of precision engagement at extended range. Charlie Team is pinned down, came another voice over the radio. We can't advance without taking casualties. Request immediate fire support. Elena identified the Charlie Team's position and began searching for the enemy soldiers who were keeping them suppressed. She found them clustered around a communication array in the center of the base, their weapons trained on the approach routes that Charlie Team needed to use. The range was nearly 600 meters, at the extreme limit of her rifle's effective range. Elena made careful adjustments to her scope, accounting for the increased bullet drop and wind drift at this distance. Unlike her squad mates' energy weapons, which traveled at the speed of light, Elena's bullets took nearly a full second to reach their targets at this range. She selected the enemy soldier who appeared to be directing the others, a larger Chromok whose armor showed additional markings that suggested senior rank. Elena controlled her breathing and squeezed the trigger, sending another hand-loaded cartridge downrange. The bullet struck the target in the upper torso, spinning him around before he collapsed. The remaining Chromok soldiers immediately began scanning for the source of a shot, but Elena was already working the bolt and acquiring her next target. Her second shot dropped another enemy warrior, and her third sent the survivors scrambling for better cover. The disruption was enough to allow Charlie Team to advance to their next position, bringing them closer to their primary objective. How is someone making these shots? Zektar's voice carried a note of disbelief. The range has to be over half a kilometer, and they're hitting every time. Elena ejected another spent cartridge and reloaded her rifle. She had fired 6 rounds and achieved 6 kills, exactly the kind of performance her grandfather had demanded during their hunting trips in the Colorado mountains. Every shot had been carefully planned and precisely executed, with no ammunition wasted on hasty or poorly aimed fire. The Chromok forces were beginning to show signs of confusion and demoralization. Their numerical advantage was being steadily eroded by an enemy they couldn't see or effectively engage. Elena could hear frustrated roars and aggressive vocalizations coming from the base below as the alien warriors struggled to understand what was happening to their carefully planned defense. Delta Team, report status, Sergeant Vorksake requested. We're in position to assault the command bunker, came the reply. But there are at least 8 Chromok soldiers defending the approach. We need those positions cleared before we can advance. Elena studied the command bunker through her scope. It was the most heavily defended position in the entire base, with enemy soldiers positioned at multiple levels and angles to create overlapping fields of fire. The bunker itself was constructed from reinforced materials that would be difficult to penetrate, even with the heavy weapons carried by the assault teams. The defending Chromok warriors were clearly their best troops, elite soldiers whose equipment and positioning showed professional competence. They had learned from the fate of their comrades, and were staying mobile, avoiding the kind of static positions that had made Elena's previous targets easy to engage. Elena studied their movement patterns, looking for opportunities to disrupt their coordination. Unlike a traditional sniper engagement, where she could take time to study her targets and plan each shot, the dynamic nature of the battle meant she had to identify and engage targets of opportunity as they presented themselves. She spotted a Chromok warrior moving between defensive positions, apparently trying to coordinate the defense of the command bunker. Elena tracked his movement and fired when he paused to communicate with another soldier. The bullet struck him in the center of mass, sending him tumbling down a rocky slope. The elimination of what appeared to be a key leader created visible confusion among the remaining defenders. Elena could see them looking around uncertainly, no longer sure of their assignments or positioning. The disciplined defense began to show cracks as individual soldiers started making independent decisions rather than following coordinated orders. Elena continued to engage targets as they presented themselves, her ancient rifle proving devastatingly effective against enemies who had no experience dealing with kinetic weapons fired from extreme range. Each shot was a testament to the marksmanship skills that had been passed down through generations of her family, hunters who had learned to make every bullet count. Unbelievable. Lieutenant Cricksal's voice carried a note of awe. Someone is systematically dismantling their entire defensive structure. I count at least 8 confirmed kills from long range. Elena had lost count of her shots, but she knew she was running low on ammunition. The leather pouch that held her hand-loaded cartridges was nearly empty, containing only the last few rounds she had brought for the mission. Unlike her squad mates, who carried hundreds of shots in their energy cells, Elena's ammunition supply was strictly limited. She made each remaining shot count, targeting enemy soldiers who were in positions to cause maximum damage to the advancing assault teams. Her rifle spoke with authority each time she pulled the trigger, the familiar recoil and ejection of brass cartridges marking another successful engagement. The tactical situation had shifted dramatically. What had begun as a heavily defended enemy position was rapidly becoming a collection of isolated strongpoints, their coordination shattered by the mysterious sniper who seemed to anticipate their every move. The remaining Chromok soldiers were showing signs of panic, abandoning their positions and retreating toward the center of the base. All teams, this is Alpha Leader. Sergeant Vorkseke's voice carried excitement and disbelief in equal measure. Unknown friendly sniper has neutralized the majority of enemy resistance. All units advance to final objectives. Elena chambered her final cartridge and settled in for what she hoped would be her last shot of the engagement. Through her scope, she could see the remaining Chromok forces consolidating around their command bunker, their movements frantic and disorganized. The mysterious sniper fire had shattered their carefully planned defense, leaving them vulnerable to the advancing assault teams. The shot presented itself when a Chromok commander emerged from the bunker to rally his remaining troops. Elena could see him gesturing with his massive arms, clearly trying to restore order to his demoralized forces. At 700 meters range, with wind conditions that had shifted since her last engagement, it would be the most challenging shot of the mission. Elena steadied her breathing and made final adjustments to her scope. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory, reminding her of the fundamentals he had drilled into her during countless hunting expeditions. Breathe naturally, squeeze smoothly, follow through completely. The rifle had never failed her family, and she wouldn't be the first to break that tradition. The bullet's flight time at this range gave the target nearly a full second to move, but Elena had studied his body language and anticipated his next position. When she squeezed the trigger, she was already confident of the result. The familiar recoil of her grandfather's rifle was followed by the sight of the Chromok commander collapsing among his troops. With their final leader eliminated, the remaining enemy soldiers abandoned any pretense of organized resistance. Elena watched through her scope as they scattered in different directions, some attempting to retreat deeper into the base, while others sought whatever cover they could find. The disciplined defensive force that had initially seemed so formidable had been reduced to a collection of frightened individuals. Elena set down her empty rifle and reached for her radio. All teams, this is Overwatch. I'm Winchester on ammunition and repositioning to support final assault. The radio crackled with excited voices as the assault teams advanced rapidly through the now undefended base. Lieutenant Cricksal's team had reached the communications center, while Sergeant Vorksike was leading Alpha Team toward the main weapons depot. The mission that had seemed impossible just minutes before was now approaching a successful conclusion. Elena began the process of policing her brass, collecting the empty cartridges that lay scattered among the rocks around her position. This was another tradition her grandfather had taught her, both as a matter of practical economy and respect for the ammunition that had served her so well. Each brass case would be reloaded multiple times, carrying forward the legacy of accuracy and reliability. As she gathered her equipment, Elena reflected on the engagement she had just completed. 24 rounds of ammunition had been loaded into her magazine pouches that morning. She had fired 24 shots and achieved 24 kills, a perfect record that would have made her grandfather proud. Every bullet had found its mark, eliminating key threats and disrupting enemy coordination at crucial moments. The ancient Winchester rifle had proven its worth against weapons technology centuries more advanced. While her squad mates carried energy weapons that could vaporize targets or disrupt molecular bonds, Elena's simple metal projectiles had achieved tactical results that no amount of advanced technology could match. The combination of superior marksmanship skills and carefully selected ammunition had overcome every technological disadvantage. Elena's radio crackled again as she began her movement toward the base. Overwatch, this is Alpha Leader. We've secured the primary objectives and are beginning demolition procedures. What's your status? Moving to join the assault teams, Elena replied, shouldering her pack and beginning the trek down from the ridge. Enemy resistance in my sector has been neutralized. The descent toward the base gave Elena a clear view of the battlefield she had dominated for the past hour. The evidence of her marksmanship was scattered across the defensive positions, each fallen Chromok warrior marking a precisely placed shot. The tactical situation had been transformed through the application of fundamental shooting skills that had remained unchanged for centuries. As she approached the perimeter of the base, Elena could see her squad mates moving efficiently through their assigned objectives. The advanced technology they carried allowed them to complete their missions with impressive speed, but Elena knew that none of their success would have been possible without the covering fire she had provided from the ridge. Lieutenant Crixal emerged from the communications center as Elena reached the main compound. The feline Nexery's whiskers were twitching with excitement, and his eyes held a new expression of respect as he approached her. The Chroma communication logs show something interesting, he said, holding up a portable data scanner. Their field reports describe a new type of human weapon that fires invisible projectiles with impossible accuracy. They were requesting immediate reinforcements and tactical analysis before we eliminated their communications capability. Elena checked the action of her rifle and engaged the safety before responding. It's not a new weapon. This rifle is over 300 years old. My family has been using the same basic design for generations. Zektar approached from the weapons depot, his forearms gesticulating wildly as he spoke. The surviving enemy soldiers are claiming that humans possess supernatural marksmanship abilities. They refuse to believe that any organic being could achieve such accuracy with primitive kinetic weapons. Elena smiled as she thought about her grandfather's reaction to being called supernatural. My grandfather always said that good shooting is 10% equipment and 90% practice. He taught me that every shot has to count, because in a real hunt or a real fight, you might not get a second chance. Sergeant Vorksike joined the group, his stone-like features showing an expression Elena had never seen before. The massive Cronin warrior was looking at her with something approaching awe, his gravelly voice carrying a note of respect that hadn't been there during the mission briefing. Vasquez, I need to understand what happened out there. My tactical display shows 24 enemy kills achieved by long-range fire. The computer calculated the probability of such accuracy at less than 1%, even with the most advanced sniper systems in the Galactic arsenal. Elena unslung her rifle and held it out for the sergeant to examine. This is a Winchester Model 70, manufactured on Earth in the year 2387. It fires .30-06 Springfield cartridges, which were designed in 1906. The basic operating principle hasn't changed in over 400 years. Vorksike accepted the rifle carefully, his massive hands dwarfing the weapon as he examined its construction. This is entirely mechanical. No electronic components, No targeting computers, no energy cells. How is such precision possible with this level of technology? The precision doesn't come from the weapon, Elena explained. It comes from understanding the fundamentals of marksmanship and practicing them until they become second nature. My family has been hunting with rifles like this for generations. We learned to read wind conditions, calculate range estimation, and account for all the variables that affect bullet flight. The other Marines gathered around as Elena explained the basic principles of traditional marksmanship. She demonstrated how to properly establish a shooting position, control breathing during the shot sequence, and maintain consistent trigger control. The techniques were ancient by galactic standards, but they had proven devastatingly effective against opponents who had never encountered them. The Chromach thought they were facing an advanced technological threat, Elena continued. They never considered that a soldier might rely on skill and experience instead of electronic assistance. Their tactical doctrine assumes that all opponents will use energy weapons with predictable ballistic characteristics. Commander Thexanael's voice crackled through their communication devices as the demolition charges were prepared for detonation. All teams extract to minimum safe distance. Charges will detonate in 60 seconds. The assault teams moved quickly away from the base as the countdown proceeded. Elena found herself walking beside Lieutenant Crixal, who was still studying the data he had recovered from the Chroma Communications Center. Their final transmission mentioned something about requesting information on human military capabilities, he said. Specifically, they wanted to know if all human soldiers possessed these marksmanship abilities. Elena laughed as she thought about the diverse range of skills among Earth's military forces. Every human learns basic marksmanship, but specializing in long-range precision shooting takes years of dedicated practice. I grew up hunting in the mountains of Colorado, where long shots and difficult conditions are normal. Most humans from urban areas would find this kind of shooting extremely challenging. The demolition charges detonated with a spectacular flash of light, sending debris high into the thin atmosphere of Kepler 442b. The Chromach base that had threatened shipping throughout the sector was reduced to rubble in a matter of seconds, eliminating the strategic threat it had represented. As they waited for the extraction transport to arrive, Elena found herself surrounded by Marines from multiple species who wanted to understand how primitive human technology had achieved such remarkable results. She patiently explained the principles of external ballistics, the importance of consistent ammunition, and the mental discipline required for precision shooting. Zektar was particularly interested in the hand-loading process Elena used to create her ammunition. You manufacture each cartridge individually? How can you maintain consistency without automated production equipment? Elena pulled out one of her empty brass cases and showed him the careful measurements and precise powder charges that went into each round. Hand-loading allows me to tailor each cartridge to my specific rifle and shooting conditions. These rounds are more accurate than anything that could be mass-produced. The transport ship appeared as a speck against the stars before growing rapidly as it approached their position. Elena used the remaining time to clean her rifle and check it for any damage from the extended engagement. The weapon showed no signs of stress or wear, just as it had performed flawlessly for her grandfather and his father before him. As they prepared to board the transport, Elena reflected on the mission they had just completed. The advanced weapons technology of her squad mates had been essential for breaching the enemy defenses and securing the objectives, but her grandfather's hunting rifle had provided the precision and reliability needed to neutralize key threats at critical moments. The combination of traditional skills and modern technology had proven devastatingly effective. Elena's marksmanship had created opportunities that her squad mates' advanced weapons could exploit, while their sophisticated equipment had allowed them to complete objectives that would have been impossible for a single sniper to accomplish. Commander Thexanael was waiting at the transport's boarding ramp, his scales showing a pattern Elena had never seen before. The expression on his reptilian features suggested a mixture of confusion, respect, and curiosity as he watched the Marines file aboard the ship. The journey back to Galactic Defense Station Omega 7 passed in relative silence as Elena's squad mates processed what they had witnessed during the mission. The ancient Earth rifle lay across her knees, its wooden stock and metal barrel looking even more primitive in the gleaming interior of the advanced transport ship. Yet none of the other Marines were laughing now. Elena used the travel time to perform detailed maintenance on her grandfather's rifle, cleaning every component with a methodical care that had been drilled into her since childhood. Each part was inspected, cleaned, and properly lubricated before being reassembled with practiced precision. The ritual was as much about respect for the weapon as it was about ensuring continued reliability. Commander Thexanel approached her seat as she was running a cleaning patch through the rifle's barrel. His scales had settled into a deep blue coloration that Elena had learned indicated serious contemplation among the saurian species. "Vasquez, I need to understand what happened down there," he said, settling into the seat across from her. "My after-action report will be reviewed by Senior Command. They'll want detailed analysis of how a single Marine with primitive equipment achieved tactical results that our combat projections said were impossible." Elena held up the cleaning patch to check for any residue before responding. "Sir, I did exactly what my grandfather taught me to do. I studied the battlefield, identified key targets, and eliminated them with precisely placed shots. The techniques I used have been standard practice among human hunters and marksmen for centuries." Thexanel's scales shifted to a puzzled yellow-green. "But our tactical computers analyzed your shooting performance. 24 shots, 24 kills at ranges extending beyond 700 meters. The probability calculations show that even our most advanced sniper systems couldn't achieve such consistency." "Computers can calculate probabilities," Elena said, beginning to reassemble her rifle's bolt mechanism. "But they can't account for human intuition, experience, and the kind of muscle memory that comes from years of practice. My family has been hunting with rifles like this for over 200 years. Every generation passes down the knowledge and skills to the next." Lieutenant Crixal joined the conversation, his feline features showing the kind of intense curiosity that was characteristic of his species. "The Chromach were completely unprepared for your type of attack. Their tactical doctrine assumes that all opponents will use energy weapons with predictable ballistic characteristics. They had no defense against kinetic projectiles fired from extreme range." Elena nodded as she checked the rifle's action one final time. "Energy weapons have obvious advantages, but they also have limitations. They create visible beams that can be traced back to the shooter's position, and they require electronic targeting systems that can be jammed or disrupted. My rifle doesn't depend on any technology that can fail or be interfered with." Zektar had been listening from a nearby seat, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "The Chromach battle reports we intercepted mentioned something they called ghost fire. They couldn't understand how their soldiers were being eliminated without any visible weapon signatures. That's because they were looking for the wrong things," Elena explained. "They expected to see energy discharges, electromagnetic signatures, or other technological indicators. Instead, they were facing simple kinetic projectiles that follow ballistic trajectories. Their sensors weren't designed to detect or track that type of threat." The transport ship's intercom crackled to life as they approached the docking station. "All personnel prepare for arrival at Galactic Defense Station Omega-7. Docking will commence in 15 minutes. Elena secured her rifle in its traveling case and began organizing her equipment. The empty brass cartridges she had collected from the battlefield went into a separate container, where they would be cleaned and reloaded for future missions. Nothing was wasted in the Vasquez family tradition of marksmanship. As the ship completed its docking procedures, Elena found herself thinking about her grandfather and the lessons he had taught her in the mountains of Colorado. He had always emphasized that the most important weapon was not the rifle itself, but the knowledge and skill of the person behind it. Technology could enhance human capabilities, but it could never replace the fundamental importance of training, practice, and experience. The debriefing session in Commander Thexanel's office lasted for 3 hours as Elena answered detailed questions about her marksmanship techniques and tactical decisions. Military analysts from multiple species wanted to understand how traditional human hunting skills had achieved such remarkable combat effectiveness. "Walk me through your target selection process," requested Colonel Vrextau, a senior intelligence officer whose 8 eyes allowed him to process visual information at incredible speeds. "How did you identify which enemy soldiers to engage first?" Elena referred to her notes from the mission as she explained her tactical reasoning. I prioritized targets based on their apparent leadership roles and their positions within the enemy defensive structure. Eliminating key leaders created confusion and disrupted their coordination. Taking out soldiers in critical positions opened gaps in their defensive coverage that allowed our assault teams to advance. The precision of your shots suggests advanced targeting technology, Colonel Vrextal continued. Our sensors detected no electronic emissions from your position during the engagement. How did you achieve such accuracy without computer assistance? Elena smiled as she thought about the countless hours she had spent practicing with her grandfather. Sir, my family has been hunting in the Colorado mountains for generations. We learn to estimate range by studying terrain features, calculate wind drift by observing environmental conditions, and compensate for bullet drop through understanding of ballistic trajectories. These skills are developed through practice, not technology. The intelligence officer's 8 eyes blinked in rapid sequence, a sign of confusion among his species. You're telling me that you made all the necessary calculations manually, without computer assistance? Yes, sir, Elena confirmed. My grandfather taught me to read the signs that indicate wind direction and speed, atmospheric conditions, and target movement patterns. An experienced marksman can process this information quickly and instinctively, making the necessary adjustments without conscious calculation. Commander Thexanel leaned forward in his chair, his scales showing the deep purple coloration that indicated intense interest. Vasquez, I'm recommending you for the Galactic Medal of Valor. Your performance during this mission was nothing short of extraordinary. But I also want to discuss the implications of what you've demonstrated. Elena wasn't sure where the conversation was heading. Sir, the Galactic Defense Force has relied on advanced technology for so long that we've forgotten the value of fundamental skills, Thexanael explained. Your success suggests that we might be overlooking important tactical capabilities. I want to establish a training program that teaches traditional marksmanship skills to selected personnel from all species. The idea intrigued Elena. Sir, I'd be honored to help develop such a program. But it's important to understand that these skills take years to develop. There are no shortcuts to becoming an effective marksman. Over the following weeks, Elena found herself at the center of a revolution in military thinking. Her success against the Chromach had attracted attention from the highest levels of command, leading to detailed studies of human marksmanship traditions and their potential applications in modern warfare. Scientists from multiple species analyzed every aspect of her rifle and ammunition, trying to understand how such simple technology could achieve superior results. They discovered that the combination of carefully crafted ammunition, precise mechanical tolerances, and skilled marksmanship created a weapon system that was remarkably effective despite its apparent primitiveness. Elena was assigned to work with a team of weapons engineers who were developing new training protocols based on human hunting traditions. The goal was to create a curriculum that could teach the fundamentals of marksmanship to soldiers from various species, each with different physical capabilities and sensory adaptations. The challenge was significant. While humans had evolved as persistent hunters with excellent long-range vision and steady hands, other species had developed different strengths. The insectoid Vorthans possessed multiple arms, but struggled with fine motor control, while the feline Nexery had superb reflexes but limited depth perception at long range. Elena worked with xenobiologists and training specialists to adapt traditional marksmanship techniques for different physiologies. The Vorthans learned to use their multiple arms for extremely stable shooting positions, while the Nexery developed methods for using their superior hearing to detect wind conditions that human shooters couldn't perceive. 6 months after the mission on Kepler 442b, Elena stood on the training range at Galactic Defense Station Omega 7, watching as a diverse group of Marines practiced with reproduction Earth rifles. The sight would have seemed impossible just a year before, as soldiers from a dozen different species struggled to master the ancient art of precision shooting. Zektar had become one of her most dedicated students, his 4 arms allowing him to achieve shooting positions that were impossible for bipedal species. His mandibles clicked with satisfaction as he consistently hit targets at ranges that would have been challenging even for Elena. Instructor Vasquez, he said, using the formal title she had earned when the training program was officially established. I understand now why your grandfather's rifle was so effective. It's not about the weapon itself, but about the partnership between the shooter and the equipment. Elena nodded approvingly. That's exactly right, Zektar. The rifle is just a tool. The real weapon is the knowledge, skill, and experience that the shooter brings to the engagement. Lieutenant Crixal approached from the advanced training section, where he had been working with a scope-equipped rifle designed for his species' visual capabilities. Instructor, I've been analyzing the tactical advantages of kinetic weapons over energy systems. The psychological impact seems to be significant. Enemy forces that have never encountered kinetic projectiles show greater stress responses than those facing familiar energy weapons. Elena had observed the same phenomenon during subsequent missions where her marksmanship training graduates had been deployed. Enemy forces seemed to be particularly demoralized by the silent, invisible nature of well-placed rifle fire, especially when they couldn't locate or effectively respond to the source of the attack. The success of the marksmanship program had led to its expansion across multiple sectors of the galactic frontier. Specialized sniper teams equipped with advanced kinetic weapons were being deployed in situations where traditional energy weapons had proven ineffective. The combination of ancient techniques and modern materials was creating new tactical possibilities. Elena received regular reports from her former students who were now serving as marksmanship instructors on other stations and ships throughout the fleet. Each message confirmed that the fundamental principles her grandfather had taught her remained valid regardless of the technological level of the surrounding environment. As evening approached on the station's artificial day cycle, Elena made her way to the observation deck, where she had first prepared for the mission that had changed everything. Her grandfather's rifle was secured in her quarters, carefully maintained, and ready for whatever challenges might arise. Through the massive viewports, she could see stars scattered across the void like distant campfires, each one representing solar systems where human traditions were being adapted and applied by species that had never experienced the mountains and forests where those traditions were born. Elena smiled as she remembered her grandfather's words about the importance of passing knowledge from one generation to the next. He had taught her that the real value of their family traditions wasn't in the specific techniques or equipment, but in the underlying principles of patience, precision, and respect for the tools that sustain life in difficult environments. The ancient Earth rifle had laughed last, proving that sometimes the oldest solutions were still the best ones. But, more importantly, Elena had demonstrated that human ingenuity and traditional skills could contribute something unique and valuable to the galactic community. Her grandfather's legacy would continue through the students she trained and the techniques she shared, ensuring that the art of precision marksmanship would survive among the stars. In the end, they had all learned an important lesson about the difference between technology and skill, between equipment and expertise. The most advanced weapons in the galaxy were only as effective as the beings who wielded them, and sometimes the simplest tools in the hands of a master could achieve results that no amount of technological sophistication could match.